So a little background on me, I'm 38. I've owned 2 outpatient imaging centers outright since 2018. This is my 16th year in the business. Started in ortho. We had PT, ASD, basically all the ancillaries, imaging, and then ended up partnering 9 years ago on an imaging center project that I've taken ownership on now. This is year 4. Tough time to do it with COVID hitting, but I did get through it. Not only did I get through it, I'm opening my second center in October. So biggest thing for me, being an outpatient center, obviously quality of service. There's a lot of choices out there in the markets and the ability for them to choose me. Marketing to the patient, obviously, as well. But at the end of the day, it's the people on the front line, it's the tech, it's the entire customer service experience, start to finish. So just really want to go over the generational gaps, get rid of some of the stereotypes, and let's have open discussion on what we can do to all get along better, and at the end of the day, treat patients efficiently and get along. So who am I? What makes me qualified to give this talk? Somehow they allowed me to give a speech. So here I am. I again started out in the ortho world, transitioned into doing my own consulting, which I still do for orthopedic and physician recruiting for orthopedics and radiology. And then I still have my consulting company where we do software deployment. Basically, if the phone rings for outpatient imaging or orthopedics, I'm here to do it. Thanks for joining us. Dennis, if you win, so this is my center. I live in Orlando, Florida. My center is 26 miles north of Orlando and 30 miles south of Daytona Beach. We do MRI, CT, ultrasound, X-ray. I don't do any nuke med. Unfortunately, should have done it, but at the time wasn't sure with the competition. And then 3 years ago, you can see under my logo, we also have an urgent care. So we're open 12 hours a day, 364 days a year, except for Christmas. It's been a great way for me to get my contrast coverage, but also it's been a great serviceable thing in the community for me to go market to my insurance companies to say, hey guys, not only am I controlling costs on the imaging side, we're doing it on the primary care and urgent care side, preventing a lot of fracture care and other various services from going into the hospital systems and inflating costs. So I'm very proud of what I've created. Main goal for you guys and for me today, being able to understand what motivates and drives the largest healthcare workforce, which is now millennials. As of 2020, as of 2 years ago, they took over as the majority generation in the healthcare field. A lot of people, I don't think, know that and really don't understand how much that's going to continue to grow as the baby boomers begin to retire. Other thing I want to do is get some open discussion going. Let's talk about the boomers' misconceptions with what they feel makes and motivates the millennial generation tick, and the same thing, what makes the millennials stereotype the baby boomers to think they're not going to get along, because at the end of the day, they're very similar, even though they don't want to admit that. Other thing I want to go over is develop some strategies. How can we hire better? I know, and I really honestly in the last 2 days have changed this presentation a lot, because as I've talked to a lot of people and been in some other discussions, you had a great presentation, Nicole, that we were in yesterday, had some of the discussions on, retention, and it's not just with the millennial generation. How do we continue to retain and, bonus our people and really show appreciation for those people that are there for us? Because what did you say yesterday was, what was the position for? They wanted $60,000 in 3 months rent?
So an ultrasound student, she's still a student with me, and looking to see, hey, how can we get her on board full time? So I asked, can we see what salary and what she would want? And she came back, again, hasn't finished school. She wants close to $40 an hour, $60,000 bonus to pay off her debt, and some money to start 3 months of living expenses. Now, granted, I did ask her what she wants, right? But it was like, wow, it's all me, as opposed to there was nothing about, hey, this is my experience, this is what this was just all of this stuff demands. And to your point, a lot of the millennials, especially the travelers, are coming and saying, no, I'm only going to work these 3 days, no call, or the call has to be within those 3 days, and no, I'm not going to be flexible. Very, very rigid with what they want.
And I think it's hard too, because then it creates friction with people that have already been there, great tenured employees, and not to call out the baby boomer generation again, but to have somebody that's put in 25 years and done well, or it's like you said with your tech. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I want to add that.
Sure.
Just kind of back off of that, and you have to go, just not in this industry, just in general. that, you know, how many you've seen that Amazon commercial where they're interviewing the individuals while that, while it's not even an interview, the individual, the applicant telling you she's interviewing for those many. They listed, you know, I can't work these hours. I, you know, can't do this. I only can work, you know, and all the demands on what that individual is asking. And it's like I've never heard of, so again, like you said, it was me. This is what I can do. At the end, you know, again, you're like, yeah, it's like, wait a second here. I mean, it was just amazing. That's really reality how this.
Yeah, or is it even an interview at that point? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a demand.
Exactly.
It's very, very difficult. So just to go over to, do we have baby boomers? Raise your hand. Anyone? Okay, all right. We've got a few. Generation Xers? Okay, equal amount Xers. All right. Millennials? Nick, you're both?
Yeah.
And then any Gen Z? Oh, we can talk some trash. I was actually hoping we would have. I was wondering who the youngest in the conference was, because I think that's another misconception, right? Is Gen Z is very different from the millennials, and then the millennials. I'm an older millennial at 38, but we get upset when we're stereotyped. I know I do with a lot of the traits that the younger generation Z has, and it's not a good thing. This is one of the most interesting and visual graphs that I could find to show. So this is the total population, not just the workforce in the United States of America, as of the end of 2020. So you can see we're very, very close. So for boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Gen Z, I mean, all within 5 or 6 million in total population. But the interesting part is if you take those total numbers, and if you look at healthcare, how do you think that changes it? Do you think there's more, less? Is there a bias, or is it pretty equal as it distributes into the healthcare field? Anybody have a take?
It's probably, I would think that it reflects healthcare as well.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I mean, there's not really you know, obviously if you go into the tech world, I'm sure it's very different. I didn't look at those numbers, but for healthcare, it's pretty spot on. So again, millennials born 81 to 96, they're 25 to 41. And the biggest thing that we're going to hammer home, and I think that we need to understand, is they're always going to ask why. They're all about questions. They don't want to be told, this is what you need to do. They want to be told, this is why you need to do it. And I think my biggest point, if you take home one thing from today, learning to be able to tell your people why you want something done, not just forcing it and saying, hey, this is what has to be done. And you made a great comment, you guys did earlier, about at the end of the day, I think they want to help, millennials do. They want to be problem solvers, but they need to be able to do so. And I think there's a big generational gap between the boomers being able to communicate that effectively to get the millennials on your side to where they're saying, hey, we're working towards a goal that I really want to get it accomplished.
So this, when I was working in Guam, I was doing some work with the water authority, and there is just some new young ones in the leadership position, and then you have the seniors there. And they were saying that I'm just so tired of these young guys asking me why, right? They're questioning me as the authority here. Now, authority with experience, and that created a lot of friction. It's like, why don't these guys shut up and listen to what I'm saying? You know, it was like the source of contention with this asking why. We weren't seeing it as, oh gosh, you know, they're really trying to learn their craft. They were just seeing that they were only questioning their seniors who were very knowledgeable.
Absolutely agree. Do you guys also, I have this issue, and I don't know if it's a positive or negative. For my people, my age, and my employees, I have so many millennials come to me asking for an eval. I don't necessarily do evals, you know, in the corporate structure, like, oh, you have to wait till your anniversary day. But I cannot tell you how frequently that happens to me. Is that common for you guys too? Yeah. They want constant feedback of how am I doing, how am I doing, how am I doing. Again, so going back to the next point that we'll go over, the participation trophy generation. Yes, sir. Why do they want this?
Thank you.
I just think that they want, at the end of the day, they want affirmation that they're doing a good job. And for my people, I mean, I feel that I paid well, so I don't think my number one issue or potential that they're coming to me for is they want a pay increase. I think that they just want, instead of the traditional 1-year evaluation, I think what I do for them is I try to at least meet with them twice a year on the schedule. and give them set goals that they can accomplish. So I set a short-term goal, which is typically either quarterly or during that 180-day period, and then I try to set a long-term goal of 1 year plus.
So in short, you do not, it is tied to advancing themselves money-wise.
I would say 50%. I would say the other thing is, again, with them wanting the constant feedback of, am I doing a good job? I think it's just as much the affirmation of they're on the track that we want to be on.
Well, you know, I thought I just answered them, but
Sure.
about 10 years ago, I'm in placement and recruitment in the healthcare industry. About 10 years ago, maybe longer, I put together a PowerPoint about this very issue. And I noticed that there's U.S. labor statistics, the numbers have changed, you know.
Yeah, they have.
But, you know, the thing is, as part of mine, I did how can we communicate with different generations that work together. What I found with the millennials, I think you have to look at it this way. They were raised by the baby boomers.
Right.
And the baby boomers, we were all workaholics, working all the time, trying to juggle time with them, you know. And I think it's that, not just monetary, that need for recognition, feedback, to know they're doing the right thing. And I think it's also has to do with the way they're raised, you know, because we were working.
You would say, in your opinion, experience, you think it's more of a financial for your people?
I was putting that much.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and now I'm going to go back and have this bias, right? So the next time I do it, I'm like, is this about money? I mean, obviously the last 2 years have been absolutely crazy. This is the other thing too, in all my research looking, do you know, I'm a small organization, so I have 2 locations, I have 57 employees in total, so obviously I know my employees by their first name and have a little bit of a better feel, but as you guys become corporate, and who thinks they're the largest in here, how many employees? You guys have how many, 1,000?
As an organization, we have about 2,000.
Okay, anybody bigger?
As I'm just a regional, it's the hospital system, we have 2,900.
Okay, do you have any idea how many would fall into the millennial percentage as a total payroll?
That would be hard for me. I would say we're still not there yet. I
Yeah.
would say, you know, millennials are just entering in right now because they're hopping.
Yeah, it's interesting because I looked as much as I could out there, not just at healthcare, but employers across the board, right? So as of 2020 in the United States of America, millennial generation, 51% of the population of the workforce as a total. No statistics for healthcare specifically, but it'd be interesting to me. For me in Central Florida, 2/3 of my payroll are millennials. And I mean, I worked very hard not to try to hire someone like myself. I think it's just happened naturally, but safe travels, I'm going to see you.
But Jeff, when you have 2/3 like that, because the majority are in that, you have less problems than when you have a bigger mix. Do you find?
Yes and no, but I would make the argument it's more of a difficult situation for my older employees to feel like I think maybe they're not singled out, but they're a little bit more of an outsider, or if we have a team decision on something, you can see that they're kind of apprehensive right away, like hands up, I'm ready to fight this type of situation. All my employees do, we always do personality matching in my office, so I have 4 colors, so on your name tag you're either blue, red, green, or yellow. And then certain colors know, hey, I need to use this color to communicate to this person. And that's been helpful too. I mean, that's been very, very good. But again, I think for me, hiring, I have a bunch of different academic schools that rotate tech, billing, medical billing, and coding. So I think by default through that, a lot of our students end up getting hired at my office, creating, I think, some of that effect to me having a higher percentage of it.
Where'd you come up with that color scheme? Honestly?
That was here, and I knew somebody was going to ask that question. So there was a lady here at this conference 3 or 4 years ago, and I still have the presentation I can send to you guys as it is. She did it here.
The disc or the?
She just did it. It was her own little thing. She just broke it down. I mean, it was kind of a little hybrid of everything. And she just did 4 different personality colors, and then basically pros and cons of each and who mixed with other. And it's been super helpful. And I do have a copy of it. I can send it, or I'm sure that they do with the conference as well. Somebody should represent on it. It was fantastic.
There's a company called Insights as well. We used that recently to determine for the managers and directors in our company. So they tell you exactly what color. And it's really good because now you know you're more emotional versus analytical and it helps you know that the dynamics of the team. INSIGH.
So this is my stereotype disclaimer because I thought I was going to have some Gen Z's in here take some offense. Baby boomers, I apologize. Just talking in generalities, trying to have some conversation. But purpose of the presentation is to be informative, educational. Not all topics are necessarily true for all millennials. Please don't take offense. And no millennials were harmed or injured during the research making the presentation. Got to be very sensitive and have the disclaimer, right? And if you're sensitive to groups of people being thrown into tiny stereotypical boxes, then this presentation may not be a benefit for you. So the biggest thing I think for all generations, and this is where in my opinion the boomers and the millennials tend to butt heads a lot more, and at the end of the day, I think they're very similar in so many ways, but they don't take the time to understand that they are. So the biggest thing is, I want to go over stereotypes, which of those do we think are true, and I'm going to go through for some stereotype stories for some more raffle tickets. So get your good stories up, let's go. Stereotype number one. We all think it, right? We all think it. That's it, in a nutshell. Where's my promotion? You know, or it's even like, even at my office, I provide scrubs. Every single day is a set color. I provide one set, I pay 100% of it. If you lose it, you bleach it, you have to buy more. When it gets cold, well, cold in Orlando, if it goes below 70, your heart is out. All I ask you to do is wear a matching shirt underneath your scrubs if you're going to wear long sleeves. And I feel like I'm pulling teeth nowadays to get that done. And at what point do I have to provide everyone with 3 Under Armour shirts as well? And then, oh, I lost it. I can't afford another. Can we even have a dress code anymore in the medical field? So misconception number one, millennials don't work hard. And I think the difference in the misconception is, again, going to the flexibility, it's not banker's hours of 8 to 5. And just because you put in a 50-hour week doesn't mean you're actually doing more work than another person that's working 40-hour week, right? And I think the other thing that we all struggle with, especially in this area of COVID, overtime, I know for me, I try to keep a tight lock on it, but it's unfortunately increased. Or like we talked about with you, how many, you said your travel staffing is what percentage?
35%.
A third of your payroll travel. That's insane. Anybody experience the same thing? Anybody higher than that? 35%, that's insane, it's 30-year payroll. So the other thing is, for millennials with a misconception about not working hard, they just work differently. And I know the hardest part for us to attract good talent, right, too, we have all these tech companies, flex time, working from home, a lot of these lovely benefits. How do we offer that? I have 6 employees pre-COVID. I never thought I would allow people to work at home. Now, all of my billers and the 2 girls that do authorizations for me, they work at home, they're efficient, I trust them, it's worked out great. It's allowed me to open up space to where I'm going to put a new med system in where their offices used to be. So again, being dynamic, see what we can do. Can we let people work at home? Can we give them flexible hours? And again, the biggest point I wanted to hammer home with this and all my research, number of hours does not mean working hard. It's just how fast you solve a problem. And I think that's where the biggest disconnect comes in between the baby boomer generation and the millennial generation, is how are we getting to that end? So another thing for us in healthcare, this is a great survey that I found, right? So here's your top 10 most attractive companies that millennials want to work for in a survey. How much healthcare up there? Next to none. I mean, I don't know if I consider J&J direct healthcare, but again, all brands that they're going to offer a platform that I don't know how can we obviously not offer the same structure that these tech companies are offering, but how can we mold ourselves or move to a middle point to where we're able to blend in some flexibility. Does anybody have anything that they've changed in their organization, offered flex time? Do you have more people working at home?
I actually have a book. It's called No Rules Rules, and it's about Netflix. They're telling me it's one of the happiest places to work. And as you can see, the third on there. Obviously, the tech company, which doesn't always work hand in hand with what we do because of this You can't have unlimited PTO like that. There is things that I've been reading in there, going my own company, my employees and stuff. Most of my employees actually, they don't take any of it. I have unlimited PTO, never take any time off. You know, I feel like encourage them. They talk about this book. It starts from the top, like, as people should take vacation, and then show people your vacation. Tell people, take a vacation, you know, take time off, like all this kind of stuff. But I encourage anybody that wants to try to improve maybe the way they're doing things. It's a great book. It's from the CEO and another person who wrote a really famous business book, and they write this whole thing about how they change the whole dynamic. So you check it out. It's $20. Amazon.
What's the name?
No rules, rules.
No rules.
Yeah. I have my back right now since speaking through it. It's a great book, and it might change the whole mindset about how you can have employees and all this stuff. It's great.
So I know for me it's tough, and I can sit up here and say, you know, changes are obviously going to be a lot easier for me only having 2 locations, 57 employees. But the biggest thing for me in this era of worrying about retention and how to make the workplace better, one thing that I changed starting last week, implemented it July 1st. I have a departmental manager on the tech side, on the back end, and I have a departmental manager on the front for front desk authorizations. They make their own schedule now, and they present it to me 2 weeks in advance. So if they can switch shifts and not have to use PTO, somebody's going to cover somebody, whatever they come up with, as long as it's fitting within the budget, fitting within the number of hours allocated. The only thing that has really cost me in that, and I don't mind paying it, I do a PTO rollover for 80 hours at the end of the year. I don't do any more, but I do buy back any unused hours at 100%. So for a small company, it cost me I had right at $55,000 worth of a PTO buyback at the end of the year, but the amount of PRM and travel tech that I had to hire because they were flexing and covering, it actually saved me almost 80 grand on the backside. So it actually saved me money, and I can tell you the amount of hours we're not having to spend making a schedule. Yes, sir.
This is actually kind of going back and forth. So one of the stereotypes I always heard is they use their vacation. Not that they can't, but they use their vacation time right away. Once it's there, they're using it.
They do, and for me, I have to be honest, and we'll cover a PTO side coming up in a bit. I do find that to be true, though. I do find that to be true, but again, do I mind it? No, and the other thing that I've implemented, which I was very steadfast on before, if you plan it far enough ahead and we're able to get coverage by flexing a schedule and you take unpaid time, I'm okay with that, if it's not excessive. Like, for example, I had a girl, she owns her own dog training business. She's a 35-hour-a-week CT tech for me. She changed some of her shifts, and she's covering shifts that I normally would have paid a little bit of a differential pay for on weekends. And she's taking every other Thursday off now is on pay. But I was able to get coverage in that flex schedule. So again, I know it's tough, and I think the larger you get, the tougher it is to implement that flexibility. But I think that was the number one thing when I sat down with all my employees and said, what can we do, what can we change? A flex schedule, and it's worked out very, very well. So, biggest thing I was talking about, how can we change our dynamics, our policies, our procedures to get this generation to want to work in healthcare? Because the other thing that we're facing too, I have a huge issue as the baby boomer generation. I know we do in the state of Florida. I don't know if it's true where you guys are, but I'm having a heck of a time finding quality MRI techs because a lot of those baby boomers are reducing their hours, starting to retire. And I mean, we talked about it in another class. I hired a PRN tech, 12 years of experience. She did 3 shifts, 24 hours total. And she scanned by herself on her first Saturday, and all exams except for my spines, which are coils in the table, she used the hand coil to save time, quote unquote. Yeah, perfect. So, but again, 12 years working in the hospital, fantastic. She shadowed 3 times. I don't know.
You said head oil?
Yeah, she tried to do an abdomen bed.
What kind of? Or a mom?
She called my head tech called me. She goes, I think MRI's tech. And then she goes up there, because she's my support lead. She goes up and calls me, and she goes, I'm just going to go ahead and work the rest of the shift.
Well, I can scan, for example, a baby in the head oil.
Yeah.
Or it's a name.
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's real life. I mean, talk to the guy that Nate does our absolutely.
You need to put a face
I
in
mean,
it.
you've seen it all, haven't you? What's your best one?
Best one?
Yeah.
I had a 20 years around working by herself and literally did not know which way to turn the license for sure. And so she didn't know because it didn't pop up on the screen. She had a new system installed, which obviously you don't have the presets when someone saved it like that. So I was up, you know, and I looked and I was like, so you just, my words, just set it up how you always do. Same way. She's like, it always comes up for me. And I just, she's like, oh, it's usually a block. She's nice. I was
Yeah, we had an unnamed competitor in our area in Orlando 2 months ago. I don't know if you guys have made national news, but 22-year-old tech aide injected an MRI patient with CT contrast, and she had an iodine allergy. So again, we're trying to do more with people that are necessarily less qualified, but where did that checks and balances system and protocol go wrong? And it ended up being the guy that stocks the medical supplies, put the contrast on the shelf, but again, labels different, bottles different, right? But at what point, I mean, and I'm interested to follow that case. I mean, where that's obviously going to pay a lot of money, but who does it come out of? Does it fall on the radiologist at the end of the day? I don't know. I don't know. But
I can share some more experiences. So recently, having with all of these travelers, a lot of them are millennials, and they're a year as an X-ray tech or a CT tech, and then they're applying to be a traveler. And I had in the last maybe 6 weeks, I've released about 4 or 5 travelers from my operation, but they don't know what motion looks like on a head CT. Oh, where do you put that ROI? Oh, that's the pulmonaries. It's just like, you know, and they circle 4 on their competency. So they're, you know, in this case, misrepresenting themselves. And the expectation is, oh, I'm going to get to the facility and they're going to train me, but they're training at 100 plus an hour on my dollar, right? But that expectation again there is, I'm very much qualified, and I can do the job. So that's on the clinical side. Then on the management side, I have, you know, young 20-something-year-olds, never spent a day in clinical, went and got a master's in healthcare administration, and now wants the director or the manager job at 100,000 plus, without the experience clinically.
I don't. It's like, where does it end at this point? I don't know. Anybody have any good stories or suggestions? I mean, my flex time, I'm very proud. It took some work to get there, but I think that really has helped. Anybody else have any other ideas or things they've implemented in there?
And I apologize, I still think to cut scan time, you don't need to choose different coil. You need to know MRI physics.
Not really.
If you are my normal, like average size patient, there's no head coil exists. Like what head can come to body like you?
So they come to find out, so they talked to her more. She never in the hospital, she was running 2 scanners simultaneously with aides putting coils on. So she was never actually going in the room with the patient. And again, that's also like a discussion of liability and quality control there.
If she could do it, I want she teaches physics for us.
All right, so misconception 2.
Sorry.
Millennials do not save money. And I think we've all heard this stat. I mean, it's very tough in this day and age in this country to save money. What is the stat? I think it's 50% of people can't cover a $500 cash emergency expense. And that is, I mean, that's not just for millennials across the board, but this was an interesting statistic that as of May of 2021, VOA conducted studies on 73% of millennials are actively saving money, and 59% have $15,000 or more in their savings account. And then most impressively too, that 1 in 4, 24% has 6 figures in savings. So again, a misconception. They work hard, but they know how to save. The other thing is on that same survey, it was a really, really good survey. I need to put the URL down there. I'll add it before I send it out to anybody. But the survey found Americans' average personal savings have grown 10% a year over the year, from 65 now in 2020 to 73.1 in 2021. So again, supporting everything that we talk about, right? We're paying all these wages. obviously, the money's getting put in retirement accounts and savings, which is good, but again, for us on this side, that money has to come from somewhere. But they do save money, and this is a graph that I was able to pull. I tried to do a little bit of a female-male breakdown too for the millennials. There's not a lot of data out there for me able to do that, but I thought this was interesting to see too, broken down by male and female, just with the millennial generation. The interesting part to see though is if you look at the $20,000 savings point on the right, that the male savings is almost double to the female. So are we continuing to see the gap, male versus female pay? And do we think that's still an issue? Anybody feedback there in the healthcare industry? I agree.
But it's still there.
I absolutely agree. And I don't think that it's overall better. I mean, we have, I think, more females in the workplace in healthcare, but I do think that the gap still exists. Misconception number 3, millennials job hop. So by default, I think too, do they job hop? Yes, but again, they're younger in their career. They do tend to move 2-3 times in those first 5 to 7 years when they're coming out of school, finding out what the fit is for them. But overall, statistically, that is not anything that is skewed to say that they do job hop their entire career more than, let's say, the boomer generation. Couple great little things and tidbits. Young people have always changed jobs more than the older people. It's definitely the case that the rate of mobility has fallen. So in the last 20 years, even for that, the aggregate average in the first 7 years for a millennial taking a professional career, it was 3.5 job changes in the first 7 years. That has now gone down to, they're saying this year it should be less than 2. So they're significantly, and again, is it because more jobs are available and we're hiring more readily? I don't know the answer, but it's an interesting statistic. And then 7 in 10 millennials living in mature economies, according to a 2017 study, would prefer to be in full-time employment rather than being in freelance work. And I thought that was interesting because I'll be honest with you, I would not have thought that was the case. In this study, I do have a link to it. It was a significant number of people they surveyed, and Deloitte's a pretty legitimate company to do statistics. So I found that to be interesting. And then here's another graph I found. Sorry, it's a little bit pixelated, but 59% of millennials who have been in their current job have been there for more than 3 years. Have been there for more than 3 years. And I don't know, another thing that I like to follow too, I've gone from 6 employees to 57 in 6 years, but I really like to follow my length of tenure and make sure that that retention is happening through that, stat and being able to follow those numbers. And I wish I had more employees to follow and be able to see that number. And then this is one of my other. So let's talk about, we talked about some false stereotypes. Now let's talk about some true stereotypes. So true stereotype number 1, the number 1 thing millennials don't want is direct, constructive feedback. They want to ask the question why, but in order to get them to be motivated, innovative, and creative, don't tell them how to do a task. Explain to them why they need to do it. Instead of feedback, offer your perspective. And that's even for me being a millennial and on the higher end of it. That's been the most humbling and I think learning experience for me is being able to, and again, going back to when we talked about often to do the eval. I don't know if eval is even the right word, but now I'm trying to sit down with every single one of my employees. Me personally, at least twice a year, if not 3, and my departmental managers meeting with every individual employee every 30 days. Not for a long time, just 15 minutes, making sure that, directives and objectives and goals are both sides are clear. And going back to the back padding, syndrome, I think it's important to do, and I think it helps with productivity. But this little quote, I saw this, and I thought it really summed it up very well. Start with the ask. I have a perspective I would like to share with you, and coming in a very non-aggressive way. Would you be willing to hear it? Giving someone a choice in the matter about whether to hear what you have to say eliminates the chance of catching them off guard and reducing defensiveness and resistance. Everybody agree? Anybody disagree? I like that one. Stereotype number 2, it is true. We are, the millennials are Generation Y. Are you sure you know why you've asked them to do something? If you are, take a minute to explain the purpose up front. Again, going back to it is time consuming, but at the end of the day, that 5 minutes, it'll get you productivity in the day. It's worth taking the time to explain it. Millennials don't ask this question out of a lot of impatience. They ask why because they genuinely want to help. They want definable goals to be able to set so they can feel accomplished in the workplace and that they're contributing to the greater good, and they do want to provide value to the company. Asking why does not mean they're impatient. Does this affect productivity? You guys think having to take the time to quote unquote babysit? Long run, but short run, it's exhausting, right? Yeah, I have one of my employees at each of my sites. Their literal job description is the professional babysitter and firefighter. I don't, it's a blended HR position. I call them one lady, her name is Raquel, I call her Mother Goose at one office. And then the other lady, her name is Brenda, she's my firefighter at the other office. If it's a little thing, I mean, if the toilet paper runs out, they don't have Kleenex, whatever it is, we have to get better snacks in the break room. That's what they're there to do.
The judgment for you enabling versus having.
Well, I think it's a difficult situation though, because if you look at before the coddling began, right, and if you looked at my turnover rate and you looked at how much I was spending, like you used to analogy of the $100 an hour and how many hours were being spent trying to find someone that's able to be retained in the position. It is a lot of babysitting, and I do feel compromised, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, for me, for my bottom line, it's been, I would say it saved me on average, I almost say 25%, but I'll say 20% profit, not having to go through the constant rehiring process. And again, this is something we're all facing. I'm not saying when I'm doing this the right way, but for me, it's either that or I lose them to, I don't know how it is for you guys, but finding an MRI tech that is good in Central Florida is literally next to impossible.
I wonder if you have an advantage being a smaller clinic, because I have 130 staff. And it's 130 different flavors of ice cream. And I can bring the world and yes sir, 3 that's full. And it's never going to be enough for the majority of them. I do one thing, then it comes to another and another, and all of these expectations. So recently, I established an incentive program. People were getting between $200 and $500 extra to work on top of double time, on top of what you're making, just for 1 8-hour shift, right? This is how desperate we are. And that created a bunch of monsters, because the next time, I'm not going to work until I have double time, until I have bonus, until I have all of these things. So that's what I'm asking about enabling, you know? If I don't have.
So I was there though with you, right? And my overtime, double time, PRN, all of that was literally exhausting me in terms of,
Right.
like for me, I don't know benchmark wise, but looking at my percentage of payroll and what I was paying versus what I make now. And I literally, 2% of my payroll on average last year was overtime. So I did a great job of cutting that down. So yes, did I have to do a lot of this other quote unquote crap, garbage, toggling, whatever we call it, yes. But to me, for my situation, I feel it was the lesser of 2 evils. And I don't know what the right answer is.
$20, $25 to be a millennial pleaser.
Right.
You think that would work?
No. But from a tech standpoint, so we have Advent Health that bought Florida Hospital 6 years ago now. And their biggest thing is because MRI techs are at such a premium, they've started day shift, they're paying $45 an hour plus full benefits for an MRI tech. That was on her, I mean, that was weekend PRN pay 3 years ago. The other thing that they're doing is they're doing 100% tuition reimbursement if they go into any other advanced program, nuke med, anything like that. As a small business, I can't compete with that. I can't compete with that, you know, and the thing that is the double-edged sword there, though, is they try to keep all their people at PRN 32 hours a week or less, so they're not having to offer the benefits package, but the perception is coming from the mothership, oh, we're hiring full-time. But again, it's what works for you, but there's no way I don't have the ability to pay for the continuing education of you know, a department of the. So it's been tough, and I don't know what the right answer is. I'm open to feedback, and I'd love to hear it. It's an exhausting thing. So true stereotype number 3, the participation trophy generation. This is absolutely true, and I heard one of the boomers say it back here. Is it the millennials' fault that they're that way, or is it because they were raised that way? And it's tough, because like you said, your generation, right? My parents were the same way. They worked. I came home, I was a latchkey kid. My dad worked a night shift, he didn't get home till 11. My mom got home at 5:30, ate dinner, exhausted, and I basically raised myself after I was 11 or 12. It's the nature of it, but so we didn't get the affirmation, I think, as much as we needed to. If we're doing a good job, we're trying to do what we do. But again, what's perfect, I don't know. But again, your values and the way that a lot of millennials are, it's not necessarily because we chose to be that way, we were raised that way. Not excusing it, just talking about it.
I don't understand.
Absolutely, and taking the time to tell them again, with going back to the why and me, whatever we want to call it, taking the time to tell them why a task they need to do is important. They're competitive. We're the most competitive generation out there. Yes, we win the participation trophy, but we want to win first place. And I know that that's my biggest drive, and I know for all my millennials on my payroll, I try to set as many parameters, contests, or things that I can do to generate productivity and just set a throwing increases out.
So I'll get this for my cheese. This is the people that work with me under it's all like this is like all the time. It's like first application, it's like always. Me, I don't know why you need me there all the time to answer a question. Like, you know, you can figure this out. Millennials, I don't get that as much.
Is that a trickle-down effect of maybe the boomers raising the millennials, and now Gen Z watch that and it's become intensified?
So, you know, that I get a lot of things, not so much a lot of Gen Z, a lot of always, more. Literally the same thing about like wanting to, I got a girl that really part-time that wants to be management. But literally, she wants to be management, she wants to be paid a lot, so she wants to work. So her idea is so she don't have to do work. She wants to tell everybody too. She's like the youngest one for make sure.
You should tell me. You know, like, this is one of Russian proverbs. The free cheese must track always. There is no free cheese.
And that's the thing. And now it's like millennials or
Yeah,
like
the free
that.
cheese
They know it comes with
everything is.
yeah, they know it comes
You put in the work to get that.
but both of them have Gen Z, Roger, Gen Z experts. There's only two. No, only two that want to be in management, but honestly, they're probably the latest.
Josh, you got a close relationship with all these people you're emails with, I assume.
So I don't do every one of my individual evals, so I have my departmental managers do at each location. So I have 4 departmental managers, front end and back end, at each of the 2 locations. They do each one of those. I try to participate in any that I can, or if they're hot button items.
But you know these individuals, persons, to some extent.
I do.
Okay. So you've got a bunch of millennials there. I'm assuming that there are a handful of them that are like throwbacks, like you should have been born in 1960, you have the work ethic and the mindset. Is that correct, or is that?
I know I would say, out of that, I'd say, yeah, 25 to 30% with that mindset of the old-fashioned mindset, and I have just as many on the other side taking that Gen Z, beyond the participation trophy. Instead of the interview, it's a demand for pay.
So let's say you got a throwback here, and a typical millennial,
Yeah.
here, they flash like crazy, they're just kind of saying each other's things and beat each other up.
I think 2 different parts. I think that they're going to get along in the fact of their work ethic is positive and productive, but I think how they're getting there or how they're going about their day is very different, right? Like, I'll give you a good example. One of my techs, she's my older tech at 60, she's 67. We have a great system, our EMR system, risk system, everything's great. It's instantaneous, work list is on all modalities. Every morning, if she's supposed to clock in at 6 o'clock, she gets there at 5:20. She prints out a manual schedule. She has a highlighting system to color different contrast amounts, everything that she does. I have 2 other techs that are millennial age that have copied her system, and they come in and do the same thing. And it drives them, going to your point, that traditional millennial drives them crazy.
The millennials hate the throwback.
The throwback, yeah, they cannot stand that he comes in and does that. It literally is probably the biggest battle back in the tech. I mean, they freak out at it. The second he'll clock out, that goes straight in the shredder every day. This is hilarious. But again, why are they important? Why do we have to cater to them? And why do we have to help understand them better? And again, I think retaining and getting more people into the field that are choosing other fields before we do have a shortage in these specialized positions that we do. Millennials are now the largest generation group in the United States as a whole, like we saw on the graph, 72.1 million people. They now surpassed baby boomers as the biggest group. They're going to continue to become a major part of the workplace, accounting for 80% estimated of the workforce by 2030. So the millennial invasion in healthcare in 2010, so this is with the statistic, right? So 80% of the workforce, and this is interesting, and it shows where we're losing a good bit of millennials not choosing to come into the healthcare field. So 80% is globally by 2030. But if we look at 2030, they're only estimating 70% in healthcare. So in the next 8 years, we're seeing a projected gap to where are they choosing tech? Are they going to go to more flexible positions from a professional standpoint? What is the answer there? Because that's going to lead to a continued shortage and wage increase for us if we don't figure that out. Just a little graph. I love my graphs, as you've seen. Millennials became the largest generation labor force in 2016. You can see that move. And I think the biggest thing seeing there is Gen Xers are also starting to flat. So anybody have millennial stories? Do you have a millennial nightmare? Do you have a millennial dream? Somewhere in between. Have we had a millennial flash? Anybody have anything good?
I have a millennial nightmare. I had this person who came to me just for help, volunteer help. And usually, we'll do admin work or something. So we started with the first thing. They were working 1 month. Okay, what are we going to do after this? Okay, we'll go on to something else. Okay, and after that, what do we do? And all throughout the day, even though the task wasn't finished, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do after that? What happens next week? And it was like, I could not answer the questions fast enough. And the thing is, he was there just to help me out. There was no time to the job or anything. He was like, okay, what's next? What's next? What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
We have a primary care office. Yesterday, what was the holiday yesterday? President's Day?
Yeah.
So when they, this is I can't wait to get back to this happened when I was gone. So my biggest primary care office, he resource, he has 6 locations. He has 125 employees. They staged a behind the scenes walkout, and they only, I think, less than a third of the staff came to work yesterday because they want President's Day. Oh, what do you do? And I haven't heard the news today of how many people came in, if it was just a one-day thing, like where do you, I mean, so we're gonna have organized mini unions now for private practice, or what is it? Where does it, so, and I was texting him last night, he's like, well, what would you do? And I said, I don't know.
And what type of institution was this you're talking about? What type of, your scenario?
Oh, it's the primary piece, my biggest reference was primary care doctor, 6 locations, 125 employees.
What do they?
They did not show, he had less than a third of his staff show work history because they were protesting because they want President's Day off because they can't get it up.
Don't they think about things like patient care?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't. I mean, this is coming from an old school millennial. I mean, it gives me a massive headache for him. I don't know. And he has a great staff. He's a good employer, and nobody stopped coming. Literally.
Wow.
So how do you handle it?
It has to be a consequence.
Yeah, and that's what he's trying to figure out. And I haven't talked to him today. I didn't call him after we're done here and say, hey.
Reward those that showed up. Give them something.
Yeah. What do you reward?
No, but if it was a stick out, there's nothing you can't.
You can't, exactly. Yeah.
You can't go to people that show.
Yes.
And
Give me $25 Amazon cards, so they acknowledge them.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like,
Are you gonna?
$25.
It's 25.
Somebody's getting it.
I think I'd rather you just tell me thank you. Hey, I really appreciate you not making my life suck today. Like, thank you for coming in. And I'm not like, yeah, have a problem. I didn't do, you know, and that's the simple thing. $25. You don't have to be, it's like an insult. Like, what's like, yeah, like, what do you do with $25? Like, $5 more. So thank you. It's something I can go gamble with or something. I'll tell you, I'm here to do this today. No, man, I just think that it's a lot of psychology that you guys are missing. Like, talk to these people. I don't understand what their hobbies are. Like, go out to see live music with one of them. Like, do something.
And I'm interested to talk to them too. Was it tenured employees that showed up more yesterday? Was it generationally the older employees that showed up? Was it a mix? Was there loyalty? But I mean, that takes massive organization for something over President's Day. I mean, it's not like they're an urgent care that's open on Thanksgiving and everybody has to work.
I'd like to see your reaction. So what if your mom,
Right.
Yeah.
they just roll their eyes and think you're just
Yes.
no.
I don't know.
No, they can say like, they tell me, my mom is not gonna come to this, so it's either gonna come to that.
I mean, they want to start Uber reviews for their own practice too. I mean, they want to start Uber reviews too while they're at it for their own practice. Like, I've seen that happen. Disgruntled employees get all their friends to leave 1-star reviews for the practice they work in. It's unbelievable. Like, where does it stop, right?
I got this great agency kid that works for me, and we're service engineers, right? So he was taking apart a CT, you know, harvesting in the parts, and he kept on coming up to me and asking me questions like, "What do you want to put the here?" I'm like, "You're an adult. I could give a flying, just put it in here. I can give it for now. You are there every single day. Make a decision and stick to it. And if it's a bad decision, we'll come back to it and we'll figure something else out." Like, seriously, I don't care. Make a decision like that.
But why do you want him to do it?
Because you think,
No, I'm just kidding.
just tell them you're adult. Be like, I do not care. Like, I don't have time for that. Figure it out, make an educated decision, and stick to it. You know, that's it.
Does anybody see,
Right.
I'm just 28 years old.
I have a gas office I work with, they just came up, another babysitting one, they have scheduled bathroom breaks.
Wow.
Yep, and they had 2 employees going into the restroom to talk to their spouses or kids.
So why don't you give it the time to do that?
Yeah. Again, but give it and take a foot, like where's the, when it becomes a thing?
They talk about this book, I'm telling you, I'm really telling you guys. They talk about this, getting the best people, and like, it reduces your workforce, but you get way better efficiency. And there's something about that, because we get really good star people, like we all have it, right? We have a few of them that are just superstars, like without them, we would be totally screwed. And if you only have that, you just get rid of all the waste, and you only have that, you get this competition of like, well, I'm gonna outdo you, I'm gonna outdo you. You have this group of superstars. And yeah, it seems like it's gonna cost you more money to try, because you're gonna have to pay more, benefits, whatever. But the reality is you're gonna get people that are there for the longest, you're gonna get less employees. Long term, it's gonna save you a boatload.
Agreed.
But you want to know that it's a senior suite to convince that.
Well, someone's not being idiots. Just go with a presentation and be like, "Wait, you guys want to save money? Some or let's save money." That's actually conversation we gotta have. Like, you just have to start. People need to start understanding things. Like, I'm sorry, you have to put your foot down, and especially middle management, and top management. It all comes down to numbers, right? Like, you want to save money, this is how you do it. This is why you put me in this position. If you want me to do my job, and you want me to save you money, effectively give you a better workforce, let me do it my way.
Sounds like they have also.
That's not how you do it.
You just need a bigger Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's like one big
Right.
A single flow.
What
So
about
this is a good little transition to the whole thing, guys. So boomers versus millennials clashing. How do we work better together, right? Boomers are leaving at a record rate. Millennials are coming in at a record rate. But at the end of the day, for the next 10 to 15 years, gonna have to work together. Gonna have to figure out how to transition the C-suite. Gonna have to transition managerial roles into millennials taking them over, and we have to do it effectively and efficiently. But I thought this was fun. Definition of a boomer: anyone older than you don't like, and a millennial is anyone younger than you that you don't like. About sums it up. So going to the focus on the baby boomers. What about baby boomers? So they're born 1946 to 1964. A record number of workers are leaving to retire. C-suites are clearing out. And I read an article. This is a specific article. I think it was U.S. Health and News that did it. This is just in the healthcare field as a whole. Since 2018, COVID was obviously a major contributor. I'm sure to increase those numbers. But we're losing 10,000 people a day in the workforce in healthcare of the baby boomer generation. We just don't have the numbers to replace them on the millennial side because we're not attracting. And reading about it too, I think everybody knows shortage too is really coming in the tech world for MRI, CT, and X-ray. Everybody having trouble seeing enough people in that. Everyone I talk to saying
students, they have more people for you.
Come see me for students.
Yeah.
And go out and find them.
You don't have people because we cannot teach them. We don't have enough students.
This is one of my favorite. I have to take offense to it. My generation versus the generation. That about time. And I'm going to put hashtag President's Day off and send it to my doctor. So these are a couple, and it's hard to see, but if you guys want to copy the presentation, you're more than welcome to. But this company that I came across doing research, they're called Flex Jobs. They do a lot of placement for healthcare and a lot of other industries for temporary placement. They did a really good job of kind of breaking down the different groups between baby boomers and millennials. Some interesting facts. So less than 10% in both groups say they chose the office as their preferred place to get work done. I thought that was interesting that that number was the same from baby boomers and millennials. I would not have thought that was the case. And then both groups considered meaningful work a critical factor in accepting a job at almost equal rates of 55% to baby boomers, 57% to millennials. I would not have thought that was true. There's a ton of other statistics, but obviously don't have time to go over them all. And then, the other one, 65% of both groups have telecommuted in their job before. Thought that was interesting too. So another graph, world of worlds, millennials versus boomers. Words that are most often used to describe the millennial and baby boomer generations. So as similar as they are and supposed to be, it could not be more night and day, right? So the number one for millennials, they're tech savvy, but the number one for the boomers, they're respectful. So millennials tech savvy, materialistic, selfish, lazy, and arrogant. And the boomers are respectful, work-centric, community-oriented, well-educated, and ethical. Literally could not be more polar opposites.
So hang on, is that what baby boomers are saying about?
Yes, so boomers were surveyed to describe millennials, and those are the most 5 common words, and vice versa.
So millennials are saying baby boomers respect.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting.
They're in there.
Problem.
But here's the interesting part. So to compare and contrast, right? There's such a disconnect there when they're describing each other. But then if you ask them about what their long-term goals are in their career, look at how similar it is. So we sit here and we stereotype each other, but at the end of the day, everybody wants to work towards the same thing. The number one thing, and this includes Gen X statistics, making a positive impact on my organization was number one across the board for all 3 of those generations. Number 2 and number 3, again, they're all similar. Down at the bottom, help solve social and environmental challenges. I would have thought millennials were so skewed. Baby boomers actually more, 24% cared about that. So again, we're stereotyping it, but we also need to take time to understand and respect what the other generation wants. And at the end of the day, it's very similar from a cultural perspective. Any comments, feedback there?
Yeah, I don't think that the environmental challenges should be that much of a surprise because most baby boomers came up in the era of the EPA.
Oh, true.
Which, by the way, was started by President Nixon. In case anybody was unclear on who started it. But no, that's what I'm saying. No, I'm not trying to. But I'm actually not surprised by that statistic at all.
Yeah, we all want the world to go end a global disaster. Weird that we all agree on that.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah. I don't think we would.
Oh, you want the world to go to shit? No, I do not.
This is the most, that stuck out to me, going back to the one stereotype that's not true about millennials, right? And managing the work-life balance piece, it was actually 21% of baby boomers responding to that versus only 18% of millennials. And I thought it would be significantly higher, again, going to the stereotype of millennials wanting that flex and that work-life balance, but not necessarily the case. Again, statistics are also 8 years old, newest thing I could find, but again, surprising a little bit. So boomers, don't make them millennials. That's the last thing they want to do. They don't want to be told they're the same, and I think millennials, we feel the same way. Anybody disagree?
Yeah, I think so.
So still, again, boomers, where we can't discredit that they're a large percentage of the workforce and will continue to be for the next decade or so. Managerial-wise and incentivizing them, I think is very different. Again, boomers, I'll look to you, feedback there. Do you think that even if you're working towards a common goal, do you want to be, or do you think you would be incentivized differently because your track to get there is different? Or do we put everybody in the same bucket and bonus the same way?
No, I think understanding what motivates them. You made a point earlier on about $25, and I was really surprised when somebody told me $25 is a mid-salt. I'm like, what? How?
It is.
So I think really having an understanding, what does everybody want? When I talked about 900 different flavors, I sent out a little survey, how do you like to be recognized? How do you like to be thanked? And getting that understanding, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach anymore.
Well, I also agree with what you're saying, like, you have to know every business, right? So $25 to their favorite restaurant is gonna mean a lot more to them than a $25 generic.
Can't go wrong with Starbucks. You know what I'm saying? You love that. Honestly, if you guys really want to do that, Google Forms, man. It's simple. You guys can figure it out, send it out to everybody, and that'll keep people in a box, like you can send out a simple question, like, what would be your best, benefit of this? Like, higher salary and nothing. Give them a box. Give them the list, right? The 5 options, the options that they live in that world. I think you'd be shockingly surprised. Again, Google Forms. Super simple, put the emails in there, go in, and everyone gets it, and then it's just like, well, you got all this is what we're doing. Like, what back in the airport, let them figure it out. Because you look like the bad guy, right? You made the decision for me. You didn't even have the audacity to ask me, like that would piss me off more than anything. And that you have to understand about us. We're thinking differently. We're thinking on like a person to person instead of in my view as like a manager looking at multiple employees. Like I expect you and my manager to know who I am, right? And I expect you not to do certain things if you know it's going to just piss me off, right? Because it's like it's intentional, even if it's not your intent, right? Because most people it's not. Most of the time we all have a million things going on, and I'm not going to think twice about it. Just try to keep that in perspective, right?
Do you think conversationally your conversation is different because whether it's conscious or subconscious, you're talking to a different generation because of the stereotypes?
I think it's more of a superior.
I think that's where the problem is, right?
Yeah.
Is we put everybody in the same bucket.
Different cultures, it's a culture.
Sure, agree. That's a whole other book there. That's a whole other.
You're coming from a different tribe, like a lone wolf going into a big tribe.
So transitioning, guys, obviously there's all those changes and understanding the generational piece, but at the end of the day, we're all working towards a common goal, right? We all have a budget. We all have patience to see how do we get to a point where as a team, as a whole, as a single entity working together efficiently, how do we recognize hard work? And going to the participation trophy thing, this is something Nicole and I talked about yesterday. I never thought, and being 38, feeling like an old-fashioned millennial, that I would ever in a million years see offices start to implement attendance bonuses and tenure bonuses. And that's becoming attendance bonuses. I'm seeing a lot of offices, I have not done it yet, but on a monthly or quarterly basis, if you show up on time and do your job, and you're there on time, you're very sure you're receiving a bonus class for doing your job. And I personally, I'm not to the point where we're doing it, but Nicole, could you speak on your piece for you?
So, we struggled a lot with the transporters. The transporters were showing up. It's a hard job, right? Pushing patients. So we had to come up with an attendance bonus. If you met X amount of shifts in a month, you got a bonus. And unfortunately, even
What's the salary?
I know.
you may.
I don't understand what the salary is for.
So they're, exactly. The baby boomers are saying, why are we paying people to do their job? Why do we now need to incentivize every aspect? Why is it I need to incentivize safety, following policies, showing up? And like I said, I'm paying out some big money just to get people to work, right? This is people across every generation. People don't want to work the shifts. I can't find anybody to work night shift. Don't tell anybody this, but I just paid $1,500 to somebody to work 3 night shifts for me. I'm telling you, they were leaving.
Well, you have a neighbor.
It's all about, so it's not an
I am Nicole.
It's not a battle out there. Like, people work, like, no offense to people, you're the one who you're probably 10 by 10 scouting, like, you give us $50,000 and get into a tech job starting at 90 grand.
Yep.
Easy, like that. It's working everywhere. They call my brother is a front end developer. I swear to God, he plays games when he's at work and they call it team building. I was excited and I was working my ass off all day. And this asshole is rolling. He's playing games with his friends. He's making $90K a year. And he's on his way up to make another 110 as another bonus for being there for 6 months. This is what you're doing.
Yeah,
this is
Supply and demand.
10,000 people a day, and the estimate is 80% of the workforce is millennials in 8 years.
It's a constant uphill battle, and you really have to find people that actually stand around the job or absolutely the tough. It's not money that's the
So no one else doing 10-year attendance or 10-year bonus.
I never heard of that.
I've seen the 10-year bonus.
We have a 10-year, but we're unionized and they put them in the union contract.
But they cater to it, the psychological part of it. We're not going to get that until the end of this period. So we're going to keep you at least for 3 months. So you may have had attendance, 100% in month 1, but the bonus is not going to be paid out until the end of 3 months because people were taking it and saying, I see ya. Yeah. So then they revamped it and
But are you talking about
the transport.
the vote,
But the
the bonus?
correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, what makes you think that they're not all talking to each other, hearing all this shit, and then just being like, well, fuck that, I'm not gonna show up to work then.
Correct.
President's protest.
You guys are fucking against your own right now.
The President's Day protest.
Well, because, people became very nasty and they were monsters. Oh, I'm not gonna work until last minute. Then they were giving me out this big money.
Yeah, it's insane. So a couple facts we talked about a little bit. 91% of those are expect to stay a job less than 3 years on average. Typically that's huge. Obviously they're beginning jobs, not long term. But again, 78% of millennials would rather spend money on an event over buying something. And again, going to that point, right?
It's huge.
It's huge.
We do that every year. We do 2 company retreats every year, fully paid. We went to Denver, Red Rock, we saw a concert all weekend, everything was there. I'm showing you, that's the type of stuff people are gonna be expecting regardless. Like, you're gonna have to start changing the way you look at budgets and going, we're gonna spend $100,000 a year for a company-wide parties. And that's just what it's gonna be.
And that retention is significant too. I mean, to be able to, and I would search statistics out there where we're following because it's very true stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the other thing, the entrepreneurial aspect, and there's jobs out there. Obviously, you can live in your underwear, and it's a real thing. I mean, I have some of my friends that have left being attorneys and several other things, and I mean, they're making great money and not really going into an office or having to do, person-to-person contact or patient care. 54% of millennials want to start their own business or have already started one. 45% of millennials will choose flexibility over pay. So again, with us shelling out that money, let's focus on that piece. Let's focus on that piece.
I think that when my employers, which partners, their positions, they think the amount they pay, that's what I care about. It's not, you know what I mean? So that, I mean, that understanding is just so young. You know, so their strategic director, which is like our CEO, he like, no, performance based stuff. Like, I don't care where you're working, how many hours a day is it. Every supervisor, as long as you get these numbers, you get everything done, I don't really get like, I don't care. The others, they like, oh no, we're gonna see you with 7 to 6 every day. And they feel like that, that's what
It's just where it is, and then
it's like difference.
we should just all bring our dogs to work too, right?
The same case when you get like unlimited PTO, or we give unlimited PTO in our office, but you'd be shocked at the point people don't take the PTO and you're unlimited. It's almost like a kind of scam. That's what we think. But we encourage people to take time off. It's just do it accordingly, kind of like the flex schedule. Like you do everything in advance, and it's like if someone can cover your shift, if you're going to go to a week, you're going to go to Brazil or something, go do it. Have a great time. Just make sure you're covered and your work's not going to slack behind. And that just seems like a lot of people love that. And you'd be shocked and surprised, I think, how many people won't take the amount of PTO, even if you give them, you tell them. And if you're getting 2 weeks a year, guess what? I'm going to spend that 2 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, take whatever time you need. And most people work really hard to do that, right? They make that extra money, they take vacation, they're like, oh, we're getting off for a week and a half, like, have a blast. We'll see if we can get back. You got, these 2 other people that cover your shifts, and you'd be surprised how much stuff you can work amongst each other to figure that out. Like, all right, I'll cover you for this vacation. And in 2 months, I'm going to go to Europe for a week. You cover me, no problem.
Yeah, I agree. And we did another thing. So I did a similar thing where we did a blind survey, Google form. Last year or the year before, 2020, obviously COVID, we didn't really want to do a big Christmas party. I usually do try to do a ton of stuff with my employees. So I took a survey. Would you guys rather do Christmas bonus or would you guys rather do a Christmas party? And I thought it was going to be a landslide, and I'm glad I didn't give the option. 1 of my employees voted for the cash bonus versus doing a Christmas party. So creating that sense of family and that sense of togetherness, they're like, oh, we love to do it because we always do a very elaborate Christmas party. We always do something super fun. And I mean, not just to me, same thing for you guys going to Red Rocks, right? It costs money, but at the end of the day, I think it pays for itself.
I think you got to think too, like our generation, we're so versatile, right? We can go get jobs in different fields, doing different things, but money is not like an aspect anymore of like, oh, I have to have a job savings. It's more of like a tool now. So like, money's not always what we're looking for. Again, I don't have that experience that having $500 bucks. Like I pull $500 all the time. I think twice that, right? But having a day where everyone gets together, we have our families there, and people have nice food and drinks, that's worth way more than $500 to me.
Couldn't agree more. Hiring millennials, obviously constantly changing dynamic. Are there any different protocols or things that you follow? Do you interview people differently based on their age, or is there a different setup? Are there different people in the room departmentally because of their age? Is there a different filtering process? Should there be?
I do not always.
I do too.
There's a brand process.
Because if you do, are you enabling the stereotype to take place by not? I mean, you can argue against both. And I think too, how much of this is COVID driven? Is COVID a scapegoat to say that it's changed because of that, or is the root of the issue big?
Well, the only thing I've seen COVID changed is now everybody's doing all their interviewing virtually, versus in person.
And I think it's a different take.
Yeah.
I can't.
And I
Get to know people, and I would tell people, we got 90 days, and I'll let you know what's not. You know, it's not. You got to.
That virtually, I did that.
Oh yeah,
I do that.
Yeah.
You
It's a lot harder to feel.
Yeah. Guys,
But actually, you can't be.
those scrubs wrinkle or not.
Exactly. It's how they react, man. It's humility that, what's in
So playing the COVID piece, I mean, I don't personally, I put this slide in here, and again, I don't know how to read into it. I wanted to honestly get feedback more than anything, but the share, so this is a percentage of the share of the following generational groups who said they saw a major, minor, or no financial impact from the pandemic or the coronavirus. And if you look at that, interestingly enough, the major impact for the most was millennials and then Gen Zs. Baby boomers all the way down last at 17%. Anybody have a take or read on as to why?
I'll just more related to retired or retired.
Yeah, just interesting.
I think there was stuff that came out of COVID, like for us, like we got started our business right when COVID happened. And the opportunity was huge, like service engineers, no one was traveling, no one was doing this. We took that and we ran with it. So for us, it was awesome. And then vice versa for other people where it's just like everything got destroyed, you know? I think it's a hit or miss depending on so many different.
Yeah, or is that service industry related to a lot of those things where the younger generation are working the jobs that weren't fruitful during those times or shut down? So this is another graph. This is percentage of quote unquote very important factors when the Gen Z generation, the millennials, are choosing an employer. And I think this is interesting, kind of going to your point earlier. We need to set the line in the sand between the Gen Zs and the millennials too, because even though the age gap isn't as great, obviously it's the millennials versus your boomers. It's interesting to see where their motivator is. But again, if you look at that Gen Z, all about the money, right?
All about the money. I see everyone blow it up.
Yeah.
And the next person don't understand. It just takes hard work.
Exactly. So, a couple little tips as we get to the last part, guys, and wrap up. Keeping these millennials employed, number one, they want positivity. They want the constant feedback. They want the constant, I don't want to say the word coddling, but the back patting. You're doing a good job. Frequency of meeting with their departmental manager, director, more regularly, I feel is going to help a lot. Let them ask why and have answers for their questions. Know why, include them on. And the biggest thing that I read that was consistently mentioned, they want to see the company values. They don't want to be handed a handbook. They want to be what's in there, practice what you preach, and see it happen in action and being able to be a part of that. Personal concerns for millennials and Gen Zs last year. This is interesting too. Obviously post-COVID, it's a newer number. Interesting enough to see that unemployment was not, in it's obviously up there, but it wasn't the one delineating a higher percentage versus some of the other ones. And the other interesting one to me is the educational and skills piece was significantly lower. Number two, good mental health. Another thing that I think a lot of people are focusing on is the continuous, mention and something for us too. I offer Blue Cross insurance through Paychecks, through a PEO. Just starting last year in the state of Florida, Blue Cross picked up mental health benefits for their PPO plans across the board. So they're allowed one visit per month with no copay. I try to have somebody come in if they don't have time to do it or do counseling over their lunch break, or if they want to talk out, I can have somebody come and do that at the office. I do try to do that, and I think that's helps some folks out a lot. But again, that's a continuous thing that's mentioned for the millennial generation for needing help or wanting to be able to have some sort of mental health program that is offered by the employer. Anybody not have mental health benefits with their coverage? No. And then the other one, going back to the old President's Day scenario, right? Ironically, that happened yesterday. But PTO buyback program, does everybody have that within the organization or no? Use it or lose it, anyone? Use it or lose it. Buyback at 100% or percentage? 50%? You allow any rollover? Somebody have a hybrid?
We have a rollover.
Up to a certain.
Yeah, I roll up to 80 and then I buy back.
60.
Anybody have any feedback? Think the buyback is a good incentive to keep people at work? Yeah, since I've started offering, I agree. The other thing too, I don't currently do it, but for birthdays, I've heard a lot of offices giving as part of their benefits package. They don't let you come to work on your birthday. Yeah, or overtime. Yeah.
I got baby boomers, half my family on the street, and everybody loves it. This is just, you just gotta try to treat people like humans.
Well, you look forward to something too.
Yeah.
2 weeks to get that stuff.
Go and do something, go take a day off, go see the cows, do whatever you gotta do. You're not 4 months today, like, have someone come to you, go to the beach, I don't know, Well, I'll tell you one thing, my efficiency, productivity, everything is up, and I'm still one of the right, so.
So just to touch on the mental health thing, Aetna has some statistics out there that we turned into a graph, but again, looking at the number of people saying they're concerned about their mental health, if you look at your age groups, your millennials and your Gen Zs, obviously your two highest in saying that they, so mental health the most. So,
The baby boomers don't care. Busy working.
yeah. To reiterate that one too, 3 in 10 millennials say they always or often feel lonely, right? So in this social media generation, that's interesting to see. I mean, that was a crazy disconnect to me from the boomers versus the millennials, literally double the amount of people saying they always or often feel lonely.